Hi, everybody. I am so excited because I have my friend Susan Sloate on today, who's an author. She sent me this book probably 3 months ago, and I finally had time to read it. You guys, with kids, it's impossible, but I finally read this thing. It's called Ford's Camelot, and it's an amazing book. So, Susan, I'm so happy to have you on, and I'm so happy to just discuss my thoughts about your book and also just hear. I have some questions for you after reading this book. So I'm so looking forward to having you on. So welcome, Susan.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel. I'm so excited to be here. I'm excited for your questions. It's funny because I thought of an interesting anecdote about the writing of this book, which I would like to mention to you just because I think it's funny. But I'm interested to hear what your questions are. Talk to me about that. You've read the
Okay.
book. What's going
Well,
on?
yes, I've read the book. Okay, guys. And it's if you're into time travel and anything Kennedy, you're gonna love this book. Susan told me, you're gonna get to a point in the book where you will not be able to put it down. And it's true. It's true. I'm like, I'm up past my bedtime. I should be sleeping right now, and I'm sitting here reading through this book. Um,
So
what
glad.
I, what I really loved about it was like I've been to the site where Kennedy was shot. I've seen Dealey Plaza. I've kind of like looked around, and your book, you can tell like you've done your research big time with who was there. Just the whole layout of everything was spot on. And there were some things I told you this, that I read like little clips of paragraphs that I was like, wow, that like I felt that. That was just such a good description. And I'm a writer too. This woman's really talented, guys. She's got a talent with writing. So I guess my main question is, as I was reading the book, I'm like, man, how much time did she spend researching this to get this so accurate?
It was a lot of time. Okay, to be fair, it was a lot of time, and part of it was, and this is true of any writer, and I know you've experienced this yourself, Rachel. When you get into a topic you're interested in, you don't want to walk away from the research. You keep telling yourself, if I just go a little further, I'll find something interesting. Now, what's fascinating is I found a lot that was interesting. I found a lot of stuff that's in there that most people would never know because they wouldn't go that far. But
Right.
I found stuff that people that people would find interesting. And throughout the life of this book, people have said to me, "Oh, I love this book, and I love when this happened and that happened." And I had to say, actually, that's true. I didn't make that up,
That's
And I
yeah.
mean, for example, there's a part of the story in which they make an odyssey to try to get medications for JFK.
Hmm.
And because JFK had Addison's disease, it's fairly well known now. It was a failing of the adrenal glands, and he was very sick for a lot of his life, and he never complained about it, but he took a shot every day, and that kept him going. What's interesting is that that journey to find the medications in a bank vault, that
Yeah.
all came out of truth.
Wow.
Yeah, in the 1960 election, you got to remember it was a much different time than now.
Hmm.
People cared a lot about the health of the president. They really did. And if you could not be shown to be hale and hearty and in perfect health, they didn't want you around. And you're talking about the youngest president ever inaugurated, 43 years old. And the idea that he could be deathly ill would have been a terrifying thing for the American public. So they didn't tell anybody. And he carried around a bag of medication with him the entire time that the campaign was going on. And his father, Joe, who was not a good human being under any circumstances, but he loved his children, so he had that going for him. Joe wanted Jack to be president more than anything and did a great deal to try to help him. And one of the things he was worried about was that something would happen to that medication, Jack would need it and it wouldn't be there. So he stashed medications for Jack in bank vaults all over the country,
Wow.
kept a record of where they all were. And so when you got to that part in the story, that wasn't just me making it up. That was something that we found in the research and actually used.
That's insane. I would never have known. See, that's what I find myself asking too. It's like, okay, was this from Susan's imagination or did this actually happen? So it is like there's a lot of crossover between like, okay, I know this is true, but is this true? Like, is that really true? So, um,
Well, I can give you another quick example that I've never
yeah.
talked about so far in any kind of an interview, and this book's been around for a long time.
Mhm.
There was a book that we read about Oswald. It was by Marina and Priscilla Johnson, I think. It was called Marina and Lee or something. It was about their married life, and On the day of their wedding, they were married in Russia, and on the day of their wedding, Marina's aunt, whom she lived with, um, saw that they were going to be having a celebration, right? And she wanted Lee to be able to fit into the celebration, and he didn't know how to waltz, and they were going to play music. So she took him into the kitchen and taught him how to waltz, and she said in 10 minutes he was doing it beautifully. Now, there's a scene that involves that in the book, but nobody knew where it actually came from. And when I
Right.
read that, I was like, okay, that's great. That's
That's
great.
awesome.
Yeah. So I've never talked about that in an interview before, but yeah, it was definitely something that we found, a lot of stuff that we found. And in fact, this may be a good time for me to throw in an anecdote, which is kind of interesting. Um, Toward the end of the story, as you know, there's a moment when President Kennedy gives a speech.
Mhm.
And the way we wrote this, because I was living in Chicago and my co-author Kevin Finn was living in New Jersey at the time. So we were talking back and forth on the phone, and we were also sending each other by email pages that we had written, right? He would
Sure.
write this scene, I would write that scene, and then we'd go back and forth, we'd fix them, we'd change them, all this kind of thing. So I sent him the scene that involved Kennedy doing that speech, right? Which I know you'll remember.
Yep.
And he said to me, you know, I absolutely loved that you used the trademark speech for that.
Yep.
I said, what are you talking about? And he said, you know, the speech that Kennedy was going to give at the trademark when he was on his way to the trademark and got shot. I love that you used that. I said, I didn't use it. He said, well, where'd you get it? I said, I wrote it. He said, it
Wow.
sounds just like Kennedy. I said, it's supposed to sound just like Kennedy. That was the entire point. And he just
That's
thought that was,
great.
I thought it was a riot that he thought it had already been a pre-written speech from one of Kennedy's speechwriters. And he thought it was a riot that I actually was reacting this way, that I'd actually written something. And I was a little bit insulted that he didn't realize I was trying to make it sound like Kennedy. So there we are.
Wow.
Pretty funny.
That's how you know you've done enough research when you can put yourself in your character, or in this case, Kennedy's head, and like actually write a speech that sounds so much like him that your co-writer can't even tell the difference
I
between
just I've always thought that
speech.
was hysterical. That was so funny. But that's one of my favorite memories of our collaboration together was his mistaking what I had written for a speech that had been already written for Kennedy. I thought that was wonderful. That was
That's
absolutely great.
insane. That's
Yeah,
insane.
yeah.
There was, it's when you read a book, sometimes you can jump into a character's mind, and the main character, Katie, she's kind of she wants to be more, outgoing, and she wants to be more adventurous, but she just doesn't really usually take those chances. And so, I mean, there's so many different dynamics to the story. And so that was one that I really liked to watch her grow and like watch her kind of face some of those fears. But I also like kind of connected with her just because there's things that I want to do, but I'm like, well, I better just like,
Sit
just
back and
just
not
sit
do that.
back.
Just be the mom. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was
Yeah.
like, wow, that's really cool. And another part, I don't know why, when I read books, guys, there's like certain paragraphs or phrases that I'm like, wow, that just really got me. And there was one, I should have had it ready. And I don't even know what page it's on. I took a picture of it because I was like, okay, I want to remember this quote. But it was describing Katie's mom in the book.
Yes.
And she basically spent her whole life just missing her father. So she was cleaning out her mother's house one day. You described, the fireplace equipment and everything in her living room that wasn't used. That it was just like basically a
Like a
scene,
stage set.
like a stage set that she never even lived her life. It was just there. And I was like, wow, that is so poignant. It's so like, it's so deep too, because how many times do we have something in our house where it's like, oh, this looks right, but then you never even use it, where you never
I
live the
know.
life. You've
And
got
if you had to
everything in
use
your life you need, but you don't actually go live it. So it's like, whew, that was cool.
trust me, there's a lot of that. There really is. And there was a lot of me, to be honest with you, in Katie.
Mhm.
What's interesting though is I keep thinking of one of my favorite writers of all time, Dick Francis, who still to this day writes the best thrillers and mysteries I've ever seen anywhere, and I keep rereading them. They're brilliant.
Yeah.
But somebody said to him once, are you like your characters? And he said, not exactly. They're all smarter, braver, and better than I am. And I always thought that was fantastic, you know. But he was, in fact, a champion jockey and all kinds of other stuff. And a lot of his experience went into the characters that he wrote about and what was actually going on. And in that sense, I'm a lot like Katie. I did, in fact, grow up in Westchester County in New York. And so a lot of all those stomping grounds are all mine. And in fact, the street that Katie's mother lived on,
Hmm.
I was so clear about where she was. I actually used the street where there used to be, or I think there still is, the summer camp I used to go to was actually on this street. And that was what I made her house and her place and whatever. And that was one of those things you just sort of throw in. It's
Yeah.
sort of a little Easter egg. It doesn't mean anything to anybody else, but it means something to you, kind of thing.
So what would you say? How many hours do you think you spent researching? Just a ballpark. I'm just curious.
I'm going to be honest about this, but it may not sound this way. Literally hundreds. We read over 100 books. We saw movies. We read magazine articles. We looked at microfilm, a ton of that stuff. And some of it, by the way, I didn't even find until after the book had been published. So I didn't really actually get a lot of the material that I learned into it because I hadn't seen the book until after our book came out. So, but there was so much in there. I mean, for example, there's a bit in the early going in 1963 where Katie gets involved with what looks like a gun running operation. And it involved a turquoise convertible that crashed on Monday, November 18th, okay, which is like the first real day she spent in 1963. And what's interesting is that I found a book that had been written by two Dallas journalists. They were married to each other, and they had found some information in files that had been declassified that involved an FBI raid that had as its center a turquoise convertible which crashed in Dallas on November 18th, 1963. So we took a lot of that stuff and we used stuff more than made it up, if that makes sense. We really did. And what ended up happening was it probably took us from the time we felt we did enough research and started putting the book together, it took us probably a year to put the story together because there was so much going on. I mean, the scheduling and this happened at this time and that happened at that time. It just drove you crazy. And then what happened was is that we spent about a year writing the first draft, and then we had a very short period of time to finish a second draft and get it published so that it came out in time for the 40th anniversary of the assassination,
Hmm.
which was in 2003.
Yep.
So the point was is that we did that first draft around it. In fact, I'm pretty sure we finished that first draft November 22nd, 2002. And the
Wow.
book was published in November of 2003. So there was a lot of moving, clipping, revising, all that stuff going on very, very quickly. That was a time when I had young children, one of whom was starting all day kindergarten that fall, the fall of 2003. And people said to me, it's just so sad. Did you miss him when he went to school? I was like, heck no. It gives me 6 hours to work while he's gone. This is fabulous. And
Yeah.
so that's what I would do. He would leave. I'd get him on the bus. I would go straight home. I'd go to my computer. And that was what I did for 6 hours until he came home. And I
Wow.
got it done. Yeah,
I
exactly.
feel that, Susan. I really feel
I'm sure you do. Being
that.
at that stage in your life, I totally get it. And so when you were in touch with me and saying, you know, I'm dealing with my children this summer and I haven't had anybody to help me, I can't tell you how I relate to all of that.
Oh,
That is
yeah.
just that is one of those things you just have to deal with because that's life. There you are. And you would
Yeah.
never not have life with them. So,
Yeah. That's what, and it's like, it's so short too. If you
oh
think
yeah.
about like your kids get to a point where they're 13, 14, they don't want to spend time with you anyway. So really you don't have 18 years. You have about, 13, 14 years of like serious time. So,
Well, that is true, but something happened when my son was in college, my younger son, that made me realize that they still needed me. He was in his first year, he was a freshman. And of course, when he left, it was like total empty nest, and it was just a very weird feeling, you know. And he would call me throughout the year. I didn't want to bother him, so I didn't call him very much, but he would call me. We talked for about a half hour, and I never could quite understand what was the point of these conversations because he'd want to know what was I doing and what was happening, and he'd tell me about his classes. But I was kind of expecting, I want to talk to you about blah, blah, but it never came up. And that summer, he came home, the end of his freshman year, and he said, "Did you ever wonder about those phone calls when I called you?" And I said, "Yeah, they were always seemed sort of pointless." And he said, "Mom, that's when I was missing you. And then I would call you and I'd talk to you for about 45 minutes and I'd feel better and then I could hang up." So trust me when I tell you, when they go away, they don't completely go away. Seriously. You'll have
That-
done your job. Yeah.
That's good to know. And it was a little stressful this summer, but I mean, I'm happy. You can't you'll never regret the time you spend with the kids. That's for
No,
sure. I've
you
heard
won't get it
many.
back either. And you also, those moments where they'll never dress themselves, they'll never go potty by themselves. Trust me when I tell you, it goes so much quicker than you think. But luckily, I think you're very aware of that, and being aware of that's going to make a difference. So I'm glad you're spending the time. That's really important.
Yes, absolutely. So as I was reading, as we were talking, Susan, there were like parts of the book, especially at the end, that I wanted to mention because it's just so crazy. It's like you want to tell your friends, "Hey, did you know that this happened?" Okay. First of all, JFK survived because it says on the back, "Where were you the day JFK lived?" Okay.
Yeah.
So she told me that I could mention that. So that's kind of a twist on the story. And
It's
then
literally on the cover of the book. You can't miss it, really.
my cover doesn't have it, but I think the new one probably
New
will.
and will. Yes.
So I'm gonna let you guys see what that looks like. And by the way, if you want to order this book, it'll be in the link of this video. So make sure you check the link in I think it's on Amazon, right?
Yes, and for a short period of time, the Kindle edition, which has everything in it that the paperback does, is at 2.99. So that's very, I hope it's exciting for people and gets them motivated to want to have it because it's really good.
Yes. But Lee Harvey Oswald, he is a main character in this book, but not in the way that most people would expect. So
That's true.
do you want to talk about that, Susan?
Sure. Oswald was one of those characters, and I don't know any other character I can think of that I've written that I had the same response to. He was someone that I became extremely convinced early on in the research had nothing whatever to do with the assassination. And I am convinced that that is in fact the case. And I don't care what anyone says. And I've had some major arguments about this with other people. There's no question in my mind about that. There's also another book, by the way, that I found, one of those books I told you about after I'd published the book. It was called Me and Lee, and it's by a woman named Judith Very Baker, who was in love with Lee and was his lover during the summer of 1963 while they were both in New Orleans. It's an incredible story, but I sent her Camelot some years ago and she read it and she said to me, "This is exactly how he was." And that made
Wow.
me feel really good that from her point of view, we captured his personality, his character, and that he was behaving in the story the way she would have expected him to behave in real life. So that's a very, very big deal. Yeah, and so Oswald, I mean, I didn't start out trying to make Oswald the hero of the story. But a lot of things had to sort of come together before I understood that number one, JFK and Oswald would almost certainly have liked each other had they met. They had an enormous amount in common. It may not have seemed so, but they did. And number two, Oswald was the kind of man who took direct action very quickly. And as a result of that, he would have done, I believe, the things that were put in front of him to do in this book. And that made a very big deal for me, a very big difference in terms of the way we depicted him.
Yeah.
So I think he's depicted differently in this than in any other novel I've ever seen because all the other time travel novels about Kennedy, and there's a lot of them, a lot. I read at least three or four on my own, including Stephen King's 11/22/63.
Yeah.
And they all deal with the same thing. Crazy Oswald who's going to kill the president, and if you can stop him, you're going to stop the assassination. That
Yeah.
is not how it works at
Yeah.
all. So this is a
Somebody
very different take.
somebody recommended the Stephen King book, and I got to the part where it was like, oh, Oswald is going to kill this, and honestly, I couldn't read the rest of the book because I just didn't.
You didn't believe
with
it?
that at all. So it's like I don't even really care what you said, Stephen King, because I don't believe that Oswald killed JFK. So I was really happy and pleased to see this. It was a completely different take on it. And I feel like if guys, if you're watching my shows, then you're probably going to really like this book. We'll just put it that way. So, um, I'm curious though. So you talked about time travel. Do you believe in time travel? Little different parts of it. You know, there's a lot of different theories on it. I'm just curious where you stand.
Well, I've read a little bit about what appear to be experiments with time travel, like the Philadelphia experiment, that kind of thing, which sounds horrifying when you read about it. Um, because my understanding is at the end of the experiment, they ended up with people who had in fact traveled in time, but literally got stuck inside of existing structures and could not get out. I mean, horrifying, terrible stuff. Um, do I believe in it? I would personally love the ability to go back.
Mhm.
On the other hand, part of me is like the way God's plan works. I feel like you don't really want to mess with that because there's stuff going on that we are not aware of and that we probably want to allow to play out. You
Mhm.
know, Kennedy's assassination was such a big deal. And the truth is, I was alive when it happened. I was 6 years old, and you do not realize the effect that this kind of an event has on you at the age of 6.
Right.
And so what's interesting is that 2 years before this happened, I was in what they called nursery school. At the time, it's now called preschool. I was 4, and I was being driven home by our bus driver who told us the story of Lincoln's assassination. I have no idea why, to keep us quiet, maybe. But the point is that when Kennedy was killed at 6 years old, I thought, oh, well, maybe this is just how presidents get out of office. I didn't know. You know, I really had no idea. But I also had no idea what an effect it had on me. And I found it out as the years went by. One of the things that happened some years later was my mother took up baking bread. And this was just like really fun. And so we would go off to school. She would bake bread. We'd come home, it'd be fresh baked bread when we walked in the door. It was great. And as part of the baking process, and I'm sure you know, you have to let bread rise for a while. And so she would do that. She would have it all ready to go, punch it down, and put a clean cloth over it. And the cloth happened to be a kitchen towel that had very thin stripes in it. Every single time I saw that kitchen towel over that loaf of bread, it reminded me of Kennedy's casket on display in the Capitol building, which I never, ever, ever forgot. So it tells you something about that. And then in 1991, I don't know how far back you've actually gone in terms of some of this research. In 1991, the movie JFK came out. Oliver Stone's movie JFK. Have you seen it?
I've watched half of it. I
Okay.
It's one of those things where I have it. And I've started it probably 2 or 3 times, but I just haven't finished it. But I will get to
It,
it.
it's truly excellent. I mean, it really, really is. And he went through hell to get it done
Mhm.
because the people who did not want to let anybody know about what was really going on there found ways to try to discredit him and humiliate him in the process. And it was a very, very difficult situation for him. But it was, from my point of view, the best movie he ever made by far. It was really good. And I remember going to see it in the theater by myself. And afterwards, here I am living in a little town in Westchester, which is very old and could have looked a lot like things looked in 1963. It was a Sunday afternoon. And I remember walking around thinking about this and thinking, this should not have happened. Enough people knew it was going to happen. It should not have happened. And that was really the genesis of the idea of writing about it. And then I started writing about it. I happened to be in a writers group at that time, and when my friends met to talk about their projects, I told them what was going on. I had a friend who was in the group, came a little bit early, read the thing, said, "This is terrific. You got to keep going with this." And then I ended up, one of the people who was in the writers group was the guy who ended up becoming my co-author, Kevin Finn. He was one of those people that was always good at solving other people's writing problems. Well, I dragged him in to help solve mine. And so he and I ended up collaborating on this, and it was just really an amazing experience. It was really fun. But it was also, I've never gone as deep into research on anything as I have on that, but it was just absolutely wonderful. There's also, by the way, a couple of planned sequels for Katie Kyler. Um,
That's going to be
and
interesting.
yeah, they don't involve JFK at all. But book number two, which I've been working on for a long time, actually involves Katie returning from her time travel because they never do time travel stories where you find out what happens to the person after the time travel is over.
Mhm.
She's returned from her time travel. She's become a much more successful actress. She's just done a very important movie, which is about to come out, and it's actually about the weekend in which she helps JFK survive his attempted assassination in Dallas. And the part that's interesting is that it's based on a book in which the author of the book, who by the way is Carl Bernstein of Watergate fame, um, he writes that a lot of the witnesses that he talked to claimed that there was a woman who was traveling with Oswald. Well, she plays the woman who actually was herself, which is kind of like a little,
Wow, yeah.
split screen kind of thing going on there. Very interesting.
Mhm.
And so anyhow, point is that she comes back and she makes this movie and she doesn't want to do publicity for it because she's afraid of what's going to come out. And so her agent says to her, listen, I'm going to put you on a live television ballroom dance show that is going to allow you to be there, to become like sympathetic to the viewers, and everybody's going to like you, and you don't have to talk about the movie at all.
Mhm.
And she does go on the show, but what starts to happen is people start to die. And they start to die because someone is killing them who actually has been affected by the time travel process she just finished going through. And so she has to sort of unravel that.
Wow.
Yeah, and then there's going to be a third book as well in which um Katie, who at this point by that time of the third book has had a relationship with a guy that she met on the dance show,
Mhm.
um, she gets involved in a final time travel adventure. George persuades her to go back in time. She says, if I can take this guy with me, okay. But the whole idea is that George is aware that there's something wrong with the story we've always been told about the Titanic.
Right.
And he sends her back in time to that. She discovers a lot of things that are going on in much the way that she discovers them with Forward to Camelot. And I get the one scene I'm very aware of that I know is that at one point or another, when the ship is sinking and everybody's taken to the lifeboats, her boyfriend proposes to her, and she looks at him and she's like, "Now you're asking me to marry you now? We're trying to
Yeah.
save our own lives, and there's an iceberg, and there's all that stuff." So that is numbers. Those are numbers two and three, and we're kind of that's something I'm working on, but that is. It has nothing whatever to do with JFK. She's finished her adventure with JFK at the end of Forward to Camelot, but the time travel process and what she learns about time travel and changing history stays with her through books two and three.
That's awesome. I'm excited to see them. I'm so glad. And you wrote this back in the book is set in the year 2000, and like you said,
Yes.
came out in 2003. Um, and what do you think about how this is all kind of, I know that everybody's kind of always been fascinated with his assassination, but do you feel like right now it's kind of the highest it's ever been, or do you think it's the same, or what do you think?
I wouldn't say it's the highest it's ever been. I think right afterward is when people
Yeah.
were most involved with it. I think what's happening now is the vast amount of documents that were released a few months ago. It is such a treasure trove of documents that very few people have had a chance to go through all of them. People are going through and trying to find stuff related to what they're interested in, but I think they're having trouble going through it because we're talking about probably hundreds of thousands of documents have been released. Now, I did myself, I decided I was going to be very crafty about this whole thing. I went to the National Archive website, and what I did was I went to the very final page of documents that were available, and I clicked on that and I looked at it. And what it was a declassified document from 1962 about all the industrial sabotage that was being done by the CIA against Cuba to try to dethrone Fidel Castro. Now, that was a really, really interesting thing. I don't know why it was classified all these years, but the fact of the matter is I figured if I started at the end and worked my way back, maybe I would find some stuff along the way that was interesting. But one of the things I'm most proud of, and I think you saw it in your copy of the book, is an essay, a final essay that we wrote about the Kennedy, the last words, shall we say, in which we specifically named the person we believe actually planned the assassination. I'm not going to give his name here because I think people should look it up and read the book. But the thing is, I'm convinced that he's the person most involved with planning the assassination. And there's a lot of witnesses that actually have him placed at various places with Oswald in the fall of 1963 in Dallas. Um, and that is all really interesting. But we felt so strongly about him as a personality that we actually created the character, one of the characters in the novel around him. So that person has the same character traits and the same all these other things that this guy had, who, and I didn't even know this, when I was actually at college, University of Southern California in the 70s, I didn't know this, but he actually debated Mark Lane, who was one of the very first critics of the Warren Commission report. They actually debated on campus. And for reasons
Wow.
I don't understand, I didn't go. I would have loved to have gone, but I don't remember ever knowing that it was going to happen because I would have gone for sure. It was amazing. And that would have been really something to see. A guy who is all CIA having a conversation with a New York attorney who was totally involved in all this and was really up on all of the details and whatever else. And there are no real, they say on YouTube that there are some clips of them because I've actually gone and looked it up. But there actually are some tape recordings, but they actually are all speeches by Mark Lane. They don't actually involve his having a back and forth conversation with someone in a debate setting. So I would love it if there were some such documents, but so far I haven't found them.
That's crazy.
Isn't that amazing?
That is so crazy. Like it all just kind of comes full circle
Oh yeah, and
back
it
and you
totally
look and
does. It totally does. And the work that you're doing now with JFK Jr. and George Magazine and all that stuff, I love, by the way, I love that little clip that I saw of you on the beach in Hyannisport this summer. It was like, now there's taking research to a whole new level, isn't it?
oh
That's
my gosh. I know. And I was like, man, do I go? And I'm like, I have to go. It was the anniversary of JFK Jr.'s plane
oh, of
going
course you
down.
had
It
to.
was the 17th. I'm like, how can you not? And it's just weird that I just happened to be there for this event. I didn't even think of the date, didn't even think of how close it was. So
That's
it's like till
amazing.
I got there, I'm like, holy cow, I have got to do this. So yeah, it was it was crazy. And no one, I guess someone told me this afterwards. They're like, usually they don't let people just wander around on the beach like that. I'm like, well, I was there for a good 45 minutes and nobody said anything to me. They're probably watching me,
Wow.
laughing at me, wondering what the heck I was doing. But yeah, I was really,
That's
really
that's
cool.
fascinating that you somehow got access that other people did not get and for no reason that you can think of. That is
Well, I
so
just walked on the beach. I didn't know that it was not allowed. And I don't
right.
even know, maybe it is allowed, but someone told me that other people had tried and they were asked to leave. So I was like, well, maybe I just showed up at the right time. I don't know.
That all of
There
that
were a
is
few other
interesting.
people, but yeah.
I was going to also ask you, and this is so interesting to me. Um, there is a very, very interesting interview, and you may have already done something about this on the channel. If so, I've missed it and I apologize. There's a wonderful interview from Larry King Live in, I'm not sure if it was 1999. It was, I think, yes, it was. It was September of 1999, and it was Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And at the time, of course, he was a New York businessman. I don't know if you saw the interview.
Yes.
There's a really interesting moment in this. You probably need to go back and look at this. I've watched Donald Trump over hundreds of interviews. He has never ever done anything but look someone straight in the eye. He always does. He looks right at you. He pays attention. And he's talking to Larry King and he's talking about JFK Jr. And all of a sudden he drops his eyes. It's
Yeah.
the only time I ever saw him do that. And I'm wondering, I keep thinking of that wonderful meme that I saw, the picture of the two of them on the floor at the Knicks game,
Yeah.
right? The very famous one. And it says, now let me see if I've got this straight. When I hear your plane's gone down, I'm supposed to pick you up where?
That's
Love
funny.
that.
That's
Love
so
that. I
funny.
think that's absolutely great. So I think there's still a lot to be revealed about all of that. But
Yeah.
one of the things I think I did make the point of is in the footage of the July 13th shooting at Butler last year of 2024, there were a lot of people obviously behind Trump who were sitting in risers behind him, right? And
Mhm.
but the person who was literally on the straight line closest to him was a guy in a fedora with glasses and wearing a sport jacket. Wasn't wearing a MAGA hat, nothing like that. But that was the guy that I know as Vincent Fusca. And I know there's somebody else who is or isn't or whatever, but the point is that that was the person I saw, and he was there, right there watching, and it was very, very interesting to me. If you haven't looked at all the footage, that's it's right there.
Yeah. Susan, did you know that Vincent and I are friends and I had VIP tickets right next to him? And I did not go because I was going to the RNC just days after that.
Oh
Didn't
my
want to be away
God.
from home that long, so I could have been there. I got a
Oh my
message.
God.
I had people at my house on the 13th, and I got a message from Vincent just moments after, and he said the president has been shot. So I run inside and I turn on the TV and I see it's replaying, and Vincent's right there.
I do find it interesting, and I'm sure you probably already know this, that this is one of the very few Trump rallies that CNN ever attended. And I
Yes.
find that very interesting, extremely.
Oh,
So
yeah.
there's just so much we don't actually know. But on the other hand, I also have a theory, going back to all of my conspiracy stuff, that came out of a news story that I heard, I think it was probably about a year and a half or 2 years ago. I know it was something that happened in the summer, I'm pretty sure. And
Hmm.
it happened in Columbus, Ohio. Apparently, somewhere in Columbus, Ohio, there is an amusement park. Okay. And there was a young man, I don't know if he was a teenager or early 20s, but a young man who was found dead in one of the bathrooms there. And he was surrounded by weapons, lots of them, guns, all kinds of stuff. And written on the mirror was a note. He committed suicide. And the note said, I am not a killer. And then he took his own life. And I thought, we've been looking at all this stuff for years and years and years. And who's to say, because as everybody knows, no CIA program ever really goes away. The MK Ultra program to create a Manchurian candidate killer, somebody who would kill on command,
Yep.
is one of those things. And I thought, this is kind of a key situation. This kid who somehow pulled himself free enough to say, I'm not going to do this, and then killed himself to prevent himself from doing it. If you're being heavily drugged, if you're being, if your mind is being influenced by things other than your own self, your own consciousness, who's to say what you are willing to do or able to do in any way, shape, or form? And I think all of these people that we're seeing, almost every one of them is deeply troubled, has under some sort of situation where they're being medicated. And a lot of these things are turning them into extremely violent and dangerous people. And I think that's something that really needs to be seriously looked into, because I think that's one of the things that's really happening here. Now, that's just
I
me and my
agree.
theory, but when I heard about that kid writing on the mirror, I am not a killer, that just did something to me. And I thought, this is something really important that this kid did. He
Yeah.
probably doesn't realize it, but he did.
Yep. That should at least get people to ask questions like, why would he say that? Why would he, why
Well,
would he
it's
put
this
that?
is all very crucial. Now, so much of it immediately gets hushed up and thrown away. And the poor kid, what is it, Matthew Thomas Crooks? Is that his name, or Thomas Matthew? I don't remember.
Something
Who's
crook. Yeah.
right. He was taken out instantaneously. His parents were never given his body. There was no autopsy. There was no anything. He was cremated immediately. There's no trail anywhere. There's no chain of evidence. And it's like, that's the kind of thing I want to know what's really going on here.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
it's like, will we ever get, I mean, if there's any indication of what's going to happen, it feels like we're going to have another JFK situation where we will probably get some kind of report, but it's not going to be the truth. It's going to be something else. So,
Well, like the 9/11 report, all
yeah.
fishy and whatever. And 20 years later, you've still got groups of people saying that's not how it possibly could have happened, and that is absolutely the truth. And it's funny because I didn't pay a lot of attention to 9/11 because I was one of those people that was so involved with all the research on JFK that you only have so much bandwidth that you can kind of go to something else. But what's interesting about all of it is my life has been sort of bounded by these two major events, one being the Kennedy assassination, the other being 9/11. And what I find fascinating about all of this is, every so often you look up and you see a clock and it will tell you what the time is, whatever it is. Well, in my case, 9 times out of 10, I'll look up and see a clock and it will either say 11:22 or 9/11.
Wow.
And that's happened over and over and over to me over the last 20 years. It's frightening when you think about it.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the things that you're going to see on the new cover of the book. there is actually a clock that says 11:22 on it. So that little bit of an Easter egg right there.
Nice.
Yeah,
I love Easter eggs, as you know, Susan.
I know you do. And you go looking for them, and that's
Yep.
great.
Yep. I love it. Well, I hope you guys take the time to look at the book. It's on Amazon. It's very easy to order. It's $2.99 on Kindle. It's super cheap if you have a Kindle, which I do. And it's you have another book too. Did you want to talk about the
I do. Yes, and this
next
is
book as
brand
well?
new. This is very different from anything involving JFK. So let's put all that stuff away for a second. The name of the new book, which just came out on Kindle almost 3 weeks ago,
Mhm.
is it's called Scenes from a Song, and it is a story about a 1960s band and a very special song that changes the lives of the people who hear it. And this all comes from inspiration from a YouTube clip of Paul McCartney playing my favorite Beatles song, which is really interesting because it's an upbeat song. It's one of their very first hits, Please Please Me, which I love. He closed one of his concerts with it. And there's this great clip of him. And because he was using it as a as part of a concert film, he was filming a lot of the audience. So I'm watching the audience, they're singing, they know every single word, they're dancing, everybody's having a great time, and some of them are crying. And I'm thinking, why would you cry at a song like this? And then I realized it had to do with their remembering things and how important certain things were to them and being moved by it. Okay. So anyway, I watched this clip probably over 100 times. I loved it, still love it. And some years ago, when I had a really interesting November marathon to deal with, Writing Rise, NaNoWriMo, which no longer exists, but it's basically an acronym for National Novel Writers Month, where you try to write 50,000 words of an original novel in 30 days, which I have done multiple times, yes, and it actually works and it's very helpful. And by that time, when you really get into it and you know you have to hit a certain word count every day in order to keep up, you just things start coming out of you and it comes out sort of subconsciously. So a lot of stuff got onto the page that I wasn't really aware of. And so this book is really one of the interesting things about it is every single person I know who has read it, my beta readers, people who are the early readers of this book, every one of them has read it and cried, which I think is great. I really need, I really need Stock and Kimberly Clark to really take advantage of all of this. But the story again is not just about the band, but it's also about some of the people afterward who hear the song later and who are going through difficult times in their lives and find comfort and hope in the song itself. So I hope people will check it out. It is currently an Amazon bestseller. It has been since it first went up as a Kindle book, and it's available as a Kindle edition right now. At the end of September, it's going to be published as a paperback as well, but it's on Kindle right now for 99 cents. So a great opportunity for people to pick it up and enjoy it. And I hope they will because this is something that's resonated with me for a very long time. And I love being able to write a book that makes people cry. That's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to read that one too. You're a very talented writer. Just the
Thank you.
way, just your craft in general is just really amazing. And honestly, I'm like, gosh, how does she do it? This is like amazing, especially now knowing that you wrote that with when your son was young. I'm like, man, there's some goals. I got some goals to have now.
No, it was in fact both my kids were young. I had a 5-year-old and I had an 8-year-old at the time I was finishing it. Um, and this didn't happen right then, but a few years later, I finished another book and I was on serious deadline pressure for that one. And my older son hurt himself falling out of bed. And his father said to me, "Are you going to take him to the doctor?" And I said, "No." And he said, "He's not, he's hurt. You need to take him to the doctor." I said, "I think you need to do that." And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, "Listen, I'm writing a book.
Mhm.
I'm on deadline pressure. I can't do this. You want to take him to the doctor? You take the day off and take him to the doctor." And so he actually did that, but he was furious at me and the interesting thing was, I did make my deadline, but only about half an hour before I was going to lose it did I actually make that deadline. So very proud of myself for that. But for that same reason, I mean, my poor kids they totally always understood. that, these projects were coming and mom had to work on them. And there was one of my favorite stories about that is a writer, a very well-known writer down here, who told a story about a friend of hers who was also a writer, who would close her office door and put a sign on it that says, "Unless you're bleeding, don't knock."
Yeah.
And I love that. I thought that was just brilliant. You have to wait, of course, till your kids are old enough to read before you can put a sign like that up. But eventually the time will come that you can.
Yeah. That's my son just last night broke his pinky finger right at the base during
Oh,
football practice, and he's 11. So I'm like, great. So now at some point we'll have to get that taken care of. We're waiting for, the specialist has to call you to make that appointment. But it always seems like there's something. I try to explain that to my husband. I'm like, you think you make plans to do something and then something always pops up that you weren't expecting. And it's okay because that's life and that's just what happens when you have a family, but it's always you really do. Like women really have to, I'm not saying just women, parents in general really have to be good at compartmentalizing and like, okay, you have an hour, you have to somehow find the focus to focus for 1 hour and then go do what you need to go do and then move on. So
I
there's a
know.
lot of obstacles and my daughter's 9, so in 9 years they'll both be graduated and who knows what their plans are, but it's like I know it's going to go fast, so you just gotta soak it in while you can. Broken
I'm
fingers
I'm
and all.
I'm just so impressed that you realize this now because when I was going through it as a parent, I did not realize that. I was like, it's going to take forever for this, that, or the other thing to happen. I didn't see the end game. And then they went off, and that was just really, really interesting. And when my older son went off, I thought I was absolutely fine. I thought I was just great. And on a Thursday night, I saw a friend of mine, and she said, "You're depressed." And I said, "I don't feel depressed." She said, "Yeah, you're depressed. You miss Colin." And Friday afternoon, my husband came home and he said, "What is this out here? Look at this garbage. This is awful." I went to the door to try to understand what he was looking at, and there was my son. He had come
Oh,
home for the weekend
yeah,
so he could spend time with me. And the minute I saw him, it was like everything was all right. But it takes time. It does. And to be able to understand that and to want to cherish all of this time now is I really admire your ability to see that because so many people never do. And so you probably will sacrifice a certain time that you could be writing in order to do this, in order to be with them, time that you could be podcasting, time that you could be doing other stuff. But the wonderful thing is at the end of the day, you'll know it was worth it. And that's what's really important.
that's right. And I feel like now that they're back in school, I feel better about sitting at my desk and I can get so much more done. And
Oh, yeah, of course.
doing videos like this, I mean, having kids screaming in the background if they were home, it
Oh,
was
I know.
hard. So I'm looking forward to having a little more time and then summer will come around next year and I'll do it all over again, but it'll be fine. So, but yeah, I so appreciate you sending me a copy of your book and allowing me to read it, allowing me to review it and let everyone know what I thought, which I loved it. I loved that you painted Lee Harvey Oswald in a different light. Um, and I just love your writing style. It's just really amazing and descriptive. And normally I don't really like too much description, but with you, it was like I wanted to read it because it was helping explain and you could really see it and you could really, it was the perfect amount. It wasn't too much, but it was, yeah, I loved
Well, you're
it.
talking to someone who hates description pretty much. And more
Yeah,
than anything, I hate description of place.
yeah,
So like you have to describe every blade of grass and every stone and every brook.
right.
That stuff makes me crazy. What
Yeah,
I was trying to do was have narrative drive forward so hard that you're only picking up details as you're running after the narrative. And hopefully that was what the experience was like for you.
yes.
It's just,
That's exactly what it was. That's a great way to put it. It was not because I'm like I'm as a reader, I'm like I want to get to the action. Like what's going to happen? I don't really care, what color shirt they were wearing, but I want to know this. And it
well,
was
my own feeling is that the color of the shirt they're wearing does not matter unless there's blood on it, in which case I need to explain that kind of thing.
correct.
But I've tried to be very careful and spare about the details because it's so much less important, some of the stuff that you would say about somebody, and there's no reason to say it. I keep thinking of William Goldman, who said, when you're talking about film, if you're doing a long tracking shot up to this mansion and it's on and on and on and on and on, there better be a monster in the house. So that's how I feel about you. There better be a payoff because
Yeah.
if there isn't, then you're wasting the reader's time. And what you're telling them is this writer does not care enough about my time to want to give me the essence of a story I want to keep reading. Once you get to that point, you're sort of dead. And I don't feel that way about it. I believe in jumping in right away. And in fact, if the first line of Forward to Camelot, if I'm correct, is 6 seconds makes such a difference.
Hmm.
Well, that may not seem like it has that much value in the context of what we were talking about. But 6 seconds for anybody who's ever studied the Kennedy assassination, they are aware that is supposedly, according to the FBI and all the people who timed it, that's how long the assassination actually took. And
Wow.
that was what I started with to make people just go fast. Let's
Yeah.
get into it. Let's find out what's going on. And the only stuff I'm going to describe is the stuff you have to know in order to be able to continue on with the story. I'm not interested in all the rest.
Yeah.
I'm
I
really
could I picked up on that as the reader and as a writer. Like that, this is like the perfect amount of description. I love it. So
I'm glad of that. I really,
thank you. Thank you again so much for the copy. And I hope you guys check it out, Forward to Camelot, and check out her other books too. What was it called? Song? Your song
scenes
book.
from a song.
Scenes to a
Scenes from a
Song.
song, right. And it's like I say, it's just a story about a band, but it's a story that I hope will make people cry and enjoy it. You know, it's a very different kind of a read than Camelot because Camelot has more weight because of the history behind it. But Scenes from a Song has weight because of the emotion, I think, behind it. And people are really experiencing it and loving it right now, which makes me very, very happy.
Yeah.
So I'm thrilled. I would not be at all surprised if a copy of the book found its way to you. I wouldn't be at all surprised about that. I just
I
don't want
would, I'm
to
just
any
saying, I would love it if a copy found its way to me. I would be okay with that.
I'm sure that I could find a way to make that happen. Not a problem. So, but I'm thrilled. Thank you so much for having me. This is wonderful. Really enjoyed the conversation and especially love talking about what's going on with your growing family and how that's impacting everything that you're doing now and all the decisions you're making into the near future. Those are really important and impactful conversations.
Yes, and I hope that everyone, everyone watching, maybe they'll understand because sometimes I get like, why don't you make more videos? You need to post more and, this social media people, you need to post more. And I'm like, I just don't want to. I'm going to do like what my time, says that I have. So, yeah, I'm doing the
Well,
best
the
I
people that
can.
I know that are posting 6 videos a day, regretful, I hate to put it to you this way, but they're all men. They have families, but
Yeah,
there's also someone at home who's taking care of their families while they're posting 6 videos a day. And there's a lot to be said for that. So
yeah,
there's no way as a mother that you do not get involved on, all the sides of your children's involvement and all the things that they're doing because you're not going to feel happy about yourself if you don't. So you're doing what you can at your situation, and the time's going to come when you may be able to do more and more and more and longer and longer and longer. As long as you can do it and it's not affecting what happens in your family, then you're great. That's
yep,
one.
exactly. And hey, 9 years goes by quick. So, and then
Oh, it does. It absolutely does.
then everybody watch out. So,
Meanwhile, hope we'll get a chance to talk again. Thank you so much for all of this stuff and really appreciate the chance to reach your viewers and hope that they're going to be excited about Forward to Camelot and about the next books coming up.
yeah, and Susan, I would even like to have you on just to talk JFK stuff. Like all the research you've
I
done.
would
I
love
mean, it
it.
would just be fun just to chit chat about that kind of stuff too, if you're open.
Sure. I could do that, all day, every day. I actually did a speech in my younger son's social studies class when he was in high school. And I talked about the Kennedy assassination. Can I leave you with two small points?
Yeah.
Because these are things that I talk to people about regularly. When they say to me, I don't know if Oswald did it, I say, you know what? I've got two things I want to tell you that I think may help you decide whether you believe he was involved or not. Number one, on the day of the assassination, of course, the Dallas police swarmed the school book depository as soon as the shooting was over. They wanted to find people, clues, everything they could find there. And all the fingerprints that they took went off to the FBI lab that night, the best lab in the world, to be analyzed and studied and everything else. And what they came up was three distinct groups of people who had been on the sixth floor of the school book depository. One were people who were actually worked at the school book depository. So it would make sense that their fingerprints were there, correct?
Hmm.
The second group were men who were there laying flooring on the sixth floor during that week. They had been there doing all this work. And so, of course, all their fingerprints were on there, and it made total sense too, right?
Right.
The third set of fingerprints was one single set of fingerprints. Okay. It was one person, didn't belong to either group. And they identified those fingerprints as belonging to a man named Malcolm Wallace, Mac Wallace. Now,
Mhm.
Mac Wallace, you can actually see a photograph of in a picture of the Skull and Bones Club at Yale with George H.W. Bush.
Wow.
Now, but here's the part that's really interesting about Mac Wallace in 1963. In 1963, Mac Wallace was LBJ's personal hitman. And I'm not kidding. LBJ killed a number of people on his way up the political ladder. And when he determined that somebody needed to die, Mac Wallace got in there and got the job done. So Mac Wallace was on the sixth floor of the school book depository on November 22nd, 1963. That's for openers. Okay, then there's a second little anecdote which you need to know about. And this happened about 2 weeks before the assassination. Kennedy was scheduled to be in a motorcade in Chicago. Okay, and he didn't go. And the reason he didn't go was that an FBI informant had told the FBI, who passed it on to the Secret Service, that in the motorcade, on the motorcade route, there was going to be a man who had a high-powered rifle and he was going to be in a tall building on the motorcade route. And he was gunning for Kennedy. So they took Kennedy out of the equation and the motorcade did go on, but Kennedy was not in it.
Hmm.
Nothing happened. Okay. Who was the person who informed to the FBI about this? Lee Harvey Oswald.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he was an FBI informant with his own FBI informant number. I think it was S179. And he was being paid by the FBI to feed them information, which he did. And just letting you know, they basically made sure, as a result of all of this, the Secret Service made sure that Kennedy was not in any way, shape, or form in the line of fire. So, yeah, so I mean, I tell that to people and say, if you want to think about this, what was it about Kennedy that he hated so much that 2 weeks before he saved his life and 2 weeks later he's being accused of his murder? Does that make any sense whatsoever? And
Wow.
people who have no axe to grind will usually say that doesn't make a lot of sense. Let me do some more thinking. Other people who seriously have an axe to grind will be very glib about it and find some way to argue about it. But those two pieces, yeah, like I say, those are two sort of interesting little pieces of information that I tell people. And as far as coming back and talking about the JFK assassination, I would love it. Love it, love talking about it. As you can tell, I'm still interested in the topic a lot, a lot.
Yes. Well, I am. Like, I just learned so much in this one conversation with you. And, this was just going to be a book review. And here I am, like, learning stuff about the JFK assassination I had no idea about. So,
Well, there's
yeah.
so much, and this is the original rabbit hole. You don't go down a deeper rabbit hole than this one, because when you come back up, you're never the same person. I mean, you learn stuff about humanity and about what people are willing to do in order to, quote, be patriotic that horrifies you, really. And so, the one thing we have to constantly remember is our president was shot down in the street by people who said, we're going to kill him in broad daylight and we're going to get away with it. And that's what they did. And it's a horrible thing to contemplate or think about. The same sort of thing almost happened to Donald Trump in Butler, PA. And it's a horrible, horrible thing when you think about it. So the idea that you were actually almost there absolutely stuns me. I got to tell you, that just stuns
It's
me.
crazy. I'm really glad. I mean, I think if I would have been there, my kids probably would never let me leave ever again. So it's probably good that I wasn't there because it would have totally freaked them out. So, but yeah, it's just crazy just to even though I wasn't there, to even know that I had a VIP ticket right there.
That
It's
is scary. That is
crazy.
genuinely scary. But
Yep.
but you know what? There's probably a very good reason that you weren't there, and I like to try to hold on to those things.
Oh
Is
yeah.
so that's
Yep.
the good thing. The nice thing is we're talking today. You're completely okay, and nothing happened to you back there. So that's the
Right.
good news. That
That's
is,
right.
and I would love to come back and talk about JFK. Just ask me. I can be bought. Definitely, no problem.
Awesome. All right, Susan. Well, thank you so much again. And everyone, check her stuff. I'm going to put everything, all of her information in the links below. So just check those out. And Susan, I hope to see you again very soon.
I hope so too, Rachel. Take care.
You too. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.